Please.
Thank you for joining us for this month's Librarians meeting. This one is for all library staff. We will be recording it so that it's archived and available to watch later as well. I'm Maribeth Shafer, and I'm the Assistant Director. We also have Gail Santy, the Director of CKLS. We also have Patty Collins from Youth Services. Diane Bott is here somewhere. There she is by the vegetables. She is Youth Services Assistant. We have Liz Duclos, she's in cataloging, and Missy Esfeld is in tech services. We have Andy Mitchner, he's our IT manager. We have Christy Snyder, she's with schools. Kathy Ron is with Talking Books and Interlibrary Loan. Mm-hmm. We have Ederlet Weber, she is with Books by Mail and Rotating Books. And we also have Peggy Manning. She is the secretary to consultants. And I'm going by pictures. So and we also have Steve Coomer. He's the business office administrator. I think that's everybody from CKLS.
I think so.
All right. Gail, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Okay. I can just a minute shut that part so it doesn't distract me. All right. We've got a lot of things to talk about this time. I sent out a message and I listed some things that I've been seeing questions about again and again. And so I want to cover those things. I also have some other things that I've just recently learned. Welcome back. It's not easy to be back in the library, but I think we're all there and open to a certain extent. Yesterday I worked with Scandia. They are moving back to curbside because of the situation in Republic County. They feel that that's the safest for them at this point in time. Okay, a big portion of this is going to be about what our next steps are running libraries in regards to COVID. And so at any time you've got a question, go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask, or type something in the chat. We've got people monitoring the chat as well. So if my library has to return to a previous phase, how do I do that and what do I say? Well, the first thing is you need to determine if you've been given that power to make that determination, or if you need to contact your board, and that will be in your library pandemic plan. Most often it is something that your county health officer will tell you. Like I just said, Scandia, the county health officers recommending that only those people who are essential come to work. And so the assistant librarian is the only one there, couldn't get in touch with the librarian, and only knew how to get in touch with a couple of people on the board. And so what I want to talk about there is that's a problem to me, that someone who's running the library doesn't know how to get in touch with people. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask all of you to do later is to fill out a document, and it's going to say who's on the board, what their address is, what their phone number is, and what term they're in, because we've been seeing some confusion about that as well. That's not an immediate priority for me to have you do. I know that you're all very busy. It's something that I would just hope that you would be able to put together. We may pre-populate those a little. Maribeth?
I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this was a sheet just for staff to see, not something you would post publicly.
Yes, you would. Yes, this is not something that you would post in the front window for everyone to have all of that contact information. And so what you do is you look at your pandemic plan and you look at your conversation with the board to determine where you are and where you need to be. And like I said, in the cases where libraries have had to step back to a previous phase, that's pretty much been determined by the county health department for them. And so it was really rather easy. The message they would send out then is that due to the rise of active COVID cases in our town or in our county, the library board is moving back to curbside delivery, or the library board or the library will be closed until further notice, that kind of a thing. I think that that's language that we all need to have ready just in case, because if you have to close suddenly, you're not thinking clearly about all the steps that need to be done. One of those important steps is to let CKLS know where you are in that process, because Maribeth keeps an active, up-to-date sheet, a spreadsheet, so we can communicate with the state and with the courier on that. Let's see. Do I close the library if a staff member gets COVID-19 or a staff member gets a quarantine order? Maybe and maybe not. You know, it really is going to depend on your library and your physical makeup. Of course, I'm looking Brittany, Angie, Tanya, Pam, all the people on the first page. Oh yeah, Ramy, Gloria, Amy, Linda, lots of you are one-person librarians. So if you get COVID-19 or you get a quarantine order, yeah, you're gonna have to close the library because there's nobody else to run the library. If you're a larger library like Jessica in Russell or me here in Great Bend, where we've got multiple staff members, that's where it really gets into that gray area. A month ago, I would have advised you, yes, to close the library if anybody gets sick, but we know better now. We know more research has been conducted. We know that to transmit COVID, you have to be within a 6-foot proximity for more than 10 minutes is where they're recommending, if you are normally a healthy individual. So here's a scenario that I know most of us have been through already this summer, and that is putting together bags for make and take. So if in Great Bend, I have 4 total youth services people that were working on this project. They were all working at 2 6-foot-long tables. They were in close proximity to one another. One hand was in a bag to get 5 beads, then another hand was in something else to get something else. If one of them would have received a positive test for COVID-19, they all would have been home, because they were in close proximity for more than 10 minutes, and the county health nurse would have placed them under a quarantine order once they got through that process, that contact tracing. As the director, knowing what I know, and knowing how long contact tracing can take, I would have taken the steps to isolate those individuals to keep the rest of the staff safe. I would have sent them all home. And I would have quarantined that department. Me back in my office, adult services on their side, that wouldn't have needed to be closed necessarily by my determination. The county health nurse may have said otherwise, and that's who I'm ultimately going to follow the direction of when it comes to quarantining and positive testing. Are there any questions on that? Because the answer is maybe. And I'm going to apologize now because I think a lot of the answers are going to be maybes today. Okay, I'll go ahead. We can come back to it if somebody thinks of something. When is it safe to put furniture out again? And again, this is, it's all going to depend. Sherry from Ellenwood said, we have returned our furniture to the library because the room we were storing it in was needed. Remember, she's in a school community library and they're getting ready for school to open up again. Our patrons have not been utilizing it very much at all. When someone does sit down, we disinfect the table and the chair after they leave. We also use Lysol, I'm assuming Lysol spray, Sherry, around the area. Yes. Is there anything else I need to be doing regarding furniture? So one of the things that I visited with the library staff here at Great Bend with last week is, does staff feel comfortable setting out a little bit of furniture? And so we have some things that have a vinyl covering that are easy to disinfect, and we set those out. We have plastic computer chairs that we purchased a couple of years ago, and those are easy to clean, and we've set those out at a couple of tables. People really haven't been using them yet. But like Sherry, what we would do, and this is if we noticed, because we can't keep our eye on one table and one chair all day long. If we noticed that someone had been using it and we saw them leave, we would go clean that. But we can't clean everything all the time, and especially after each touch. And so, Sherry, I think you're doing enough. One of the things is, you know, before you put more things out, ask your staff, is this something we're comfortable with? Ask them, if you're the only one here, this is going to be a different question, but have people been looking for a place to sit? Do we see people sitting on the floor and plugging their laptop in next to the electrical outlet? If that's the case, then probably yes, people do need a place to sit. Linda Scott at Lebanon works in a small library. Linda, are you still working on an appointment basis? You just let me know in the chat. She says yes, but the overstuffed chairs, maybe not. That's really going to depend on your comfort level, because there's no really good way to absolutely disinfect that unless you've got a steam cleaner and you've got disinfectant for this that's going to work in the steam cleaner. And so this is definitely a case of, is my staff comfortable with this? Amy says we keep the chairs up on the table and patrons ask before taking them down to use. It's then moved to the side to clean. We are a very small library and it hasn't been an issue. And that's a really good process and a routine to get into. And yes, she does have a small library. That way she knows if somebody has moved a chair, and that way she can address it with the disinfecting. Patty says probably a lot of questions about furniture is, do you have cleaning and disinfecting supplies? Patty, are you indicating those might come from patrons?
This is Patty. I think that the question about adding your furniture back in is, do you actually have the supplies in your building to be able to clean and disinfect those items? For some, the answer is probably no for that reason, because Lysol spray is one of those things that's really hard to get.
Right, right. Yes, and that can be tricky. You do have the gallon of disinfectant from CKLS, but we don't know, and that's something that you would have to determine for sure, is, are you comfortable using that on your upholstered furniture? I've not tested it. I've not flipped a chair upside down and sprayed a corner multiple times to see if it's going to cause fading or if it's going to get bleachy spots or anything like that. So that may be something else that determines if you put your cozy overstuffed furniture out. Okay, the next question is, I hear CKLS talk about radical candor. What is this? Radical candor is an amazing tool to open communication paths between different parties. Kim Scott wrote Radical Candor. It's a book that all of us at CKLS have read or are in the process of reading. Oh, Maribeth's running to fetch it. We also have a copy for you to borrow. And Radical Candor is, it is challenging directly and caring personally, but to me, the really easy way to discuss it is in terms of when it's time to terminate an employee. So if you have someone who is underperforming, they're not showing up on time, they just aren't getting the job done, but on your evaluation, you say, yeah, you're doing fine. And then the next month you go to terminate them and you say, these are the reasons we're letting you go. The very first words out of their mouth are going to be, well, why didn't you tell me I could have fixed that? You need to be honest and open. You need to be frank and candid, kind and empathetic at the same time. And so when we talk about radical candor at CKLS, one of the best ways to explain it is something that we've said for a long time, is that, so if I'm out training you on Pathfinder Central, and I really wouldn't be doing that anymore, but I used to for sure. And at the end of my meeting, one of the things that I would say to you, and this is something that all the consultants will say to you, is, listen, if you have any questions, be sure and call us at CKLS. If you're not comfortable talking to me, go ahead and call somebody else. We'll get your questions answered. That's best being candid. Perhaps our personalities don't work, or perhaps you just like to talk to somebody else better. You connect with them better. We don't let our personal feelings get involved here because we're working with professionals in a professional relationship. So anyway, Maribeth, I'll let you talk about that, what we wanted to do. This tool has revolutionized our own communications with each other.
Yes. In April, we had originally planned to have an in-person workshop for radical candor, where you care personally, but you challenge directly. And that's being radically candid with someone. You care about them enough to help them fix the issue that you see at hand. There is a question if there are multiple copies of this book, and this is the only one that I see in Pathfinder. If there's enough demand, we'll probably purchase a couple more.
Yes.
We'd be happy to do that. And Patty's put in the chat box a link to the blog. You can also follow Radical Candor on Facebook. The author Kim Scott, who used to work for Google, posts regularly on Facebook as well. And then we were going to do a workshop in December, but I don't think that's going to happen either. Radical Candor really needs to be in person, because that's the only way it's going to work. To really be candid with somebody in a caring way, you really need to do that in an in-person workshop. So look for it. Hopefully in 2021. I may be overly optimistic, but it is coming.
Well, if you're overly optimistic, so am I, because this is just an amazing thing. If you were ever at Chris Ripple's very last workshop called Critical Conversations, it really builds on that. And it helps you learn how to have those tough conversations that you have to have. And that's just with starting with a patron to telling a board member that, hey, you are way overstepping and you need to back off. Now, those are the words that you would never, ever, ever use. But with radical candor, and with an understanding that we use radical candor, you could tell that board member this information and you wouldn't be in trouble for it. And so I think that that's a really, really helpful tool. It's not easy to use radical candor. You have to make yourself vulnerable, but I believe that it's very much worth it. It wastes a lot of time on, you'd think that being candid doesn't do this, but you have a far less hurt feelings in relationships and conversations when you use radical candor. It's not an excuse, though, to be mean, for sure. Okay, here's a big question. What do I do about story time this fall? Well, we had this amazing, amazing webinar, and we had a technical failure, and so only part of it got recorded. So what Maribeth and Patty have talked about is doing a one-on-one webinar where they record it and then posting it up there for you all to know the nitty-gritty of that last webinar that we had. It's going to cover the new alternative option. It will recover the requirements, the changed requirements for times. Patty's received several questions since that webinar, and she'll be answering those things then. So you look for that to come very soon. Okay. When can we send new books to CKLS? Right now. You can do that. My technical services gals are nodding their heads like bobblehead dolls in there. On my screen, they're all lined up together. Yes, you can send things to them now. Oh, Liz is pointing out that it's empty back here. They've got lots of room and they're waiting for your work. If you're ordering things from Ingram, it'll get shipped directly to CKLS. They will come processed, and so they move to the front of the line in cataloging, and they'll get shipped out to you faster. If you're not ordering from Ingram and you have questions about that, you're going to call Missy at CKLS. You can call her on the hotline. That's what I call the toll-free number. And Missy will either come up and talk to you, or she'll visit with you on the phone or with Log Me In. If you need training on Ingram, Missy is able to do that as well. We talk about Ingram a lot because it saves libraries a great deal of money in the long run. So yes, you can start sending your books now. Along with that is donations. And I had a librarian contact me, and this is something that's been on my mind for quite a while. And it is about advertising donations out on the CKLS Google group. So when I used to train a new librarian, and Maribeth does something very similar, and they would ask about donations. And inevitably, they have boxes of donations they have to process through, because that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to work on. One of the things that I would do is I would first have them check to see if it was in excellent condition, brand new condition, inside and out. You can't look at the cover. You've got to open it up and flip through the pages. First thing is condition. Get your nose in there and smell the thing. Open it up and look at the copyright date. Is it less than 5 years old? So this is like a flow chart. If this, then that, if this, then that. So if it's in excellent condition and it smells good and it's less than 5 years old, here's your next question. You're going to look in Pathfinder Central and you're going to see if there are any copies in there. If there are already 5 and it's not a brand new bestseller, especially if you're a small library with limited space, you're really going to have to ask yourself some questions then. If I had this book and I had to exchange actual dollars for it, is it something I would buy to add to our collection because our patrons are going to want to use it? If the answer to all of that stuff is yes, then add it to your collection. If the answer to all of that stuff is no, nobody else wants it either. Nobody else wants it. Don't advertise it on the Google group. Put it in the recycle. Don't advertise it to CanLibel. Put it in recycle. We go and weed libraries, and now we're not going to be able to do that nearly as much. We go and weed libraries, and a large portion of what we remove are not things that were purchased with library dollars. They are donations that were added. When you send a donation to CKLS, it costs now about $13 to $15 for us to copy that and put it on your shelf. So if that donation is a Scholastic paperback falling apart from the 1980s and it costs 75 cents, it's not worth it to put it in the collection when the first time it checks out, it's going to fall apart. If you don't want it and it's older, please don't advertise that out because other libraries don't want it either. Another thing to really consider right now is where these donations have been and where have they been stored and how long and things like that. You're really going to have to ask yourself some questions. If it's out of date, get rid of it. If it's in bad condition, throw it out, or recycle it, whatever is going to work for you. If it's got a cover on it, take the cover off and look under the cover. We see really grungy stuff all the time because someone just looked at the external side of it. The technical services gals are empowered to send something back. If it is something that is infested or moldy, they put it in a Ziploc and they dispose of it. We don't send a moldy book or a bed bug ridden book back to your library, and I think you'll thank us for that. We don't want that in our system, and we don't want you to have to deal with that either. So really think before you advertise anything out. If you've received a second copy of a brand new book that's on the bestseller list, that is very different than the kinds of things I'm talking about. If you have weeded books from your library and you have removed them from Pathfinder Central, another library doesn't want that stuff. And it doesn't need to be in another library. So really be mindful about that. I know that books are very emotional for us and it's difficult for us to get rid of them. And we just hope maybe they've got a little life left somewhere else. But because of our big consortia catalog with over 100,000 unique items in it, somebody else isn't going to want it. If they wanted it, they would have already borrowed it. Any discussion or question on that? We've got a little bit of chat.
This is Patty. We don't want to discourage you from getting rid of that item because we've encouraged you to truly get rid of it. And we do know that it is an emotional thing. And if you've ever seen me weed, you'll see me take a journey back to my junior high years when I go, oh, as I find things. And that's okay that we do that. but we still have to look at it critically and go, just because it was Patty's favorite book from 1979 when she was in the 6th grade, doesn't mean that it still fits kids today. And so that emotional, Gail's always said, if you really like it that much, it probably should be on your home bookshelf. Or the matter of don't hesitate to discard it when you know that it's out of date, just because you know that it's going to recycle and that you're not going to be able to pass it off to Sylvan Grove or Stockton or Claflin. So be brave and be bold in those decisions, because we know that you can do them, because they truly are the best things for your patrons.
As I said, the CKLS weeding team really isn't going to be able to come out and visit your library this year. So this is just a gentle reminder to all of you to be working on weeding. You need to weed 3% of your collection to meet that CKLS system grant standard. And it's probably, to me, one of the easiest ones to meet. If you need to, Maribeth will give you the exact number of items you need to weed so that you can make that standard. New librarians, we'll figure out a way to help you, but it probably won't be us in the library. For the librarians that are new and are having difficulty, sometimes what we'll do is we'll download the report. Go ahead, Maribeth.
I just put the report for weeding in the chat. So you can follow where it is. It was updated this month. I haven't updated it this week, but it has been updated this month. The update date is on the bottom of the chart.
Right. So Maribeth in the past has helped new librarians say, okay, look at this spreadsheet. Look at everything that hasn't checked out in the last 10 years. Find that and remove it, and you've made your 3%. There's lots of different ways to help you with that. If you're not comfortable deciding, oh, should I keep this or should I not yet, because you're not familiar with your collection and your community.
I do have a question about another thing about donations. What about random books that arrive on courier that has no barcode, no indication from what library it came from? I have received some odd items and old books. You're not required to keep any donation. We're going to assume that an unidentified book that's coming on the courier or showing up in your book drop is a donation. And if it's as such, I would treat it with the same kind of, yeah.
Yep, check it. So Patty says, the statement she just made is a good example of radical candor. You'll likely notice that she hesitated and used careful wording, but she made her point in a kind way, yes. Some of us inherited libraries that were an abysmal mess, is the nice way to say it, and I think I've weeded enough for the next 10 years. Not I personally, my library team upstairs weeded over 20,000 items the first year. Somehow we still manage to weed by 3% every year because stuff gets older or it gets worn out or it gets used and things like that. Linda Scott asks, is there a required dollar amount of required additions this year? Linda, there's not a dollar amount that is required for you to spend on things that you put into your collection. If you look at the Kansas Public Library standards, it does give you some recommendations on a budget breakdown, like how much of the total budget should be going to pay for staff or personnel, how much should go for materials, and materials is usually 12% of your total budget. That's the dream world, people. Some libraries it may be more than that and some not. But that's where the guideline is for there. Okay.
I had another comment in the chat, just it feels like the number of items we've weeded in the past 7 years is good for the next 10 years. So a lot of libraries have been doing a lot of weeding this year. I think you'll notice that in the chart as well.
Well, and that's because it's one of the things we can do. And it's one of the things we could do when our doors were closed as well. Mm-hmm. When you've got a new librarian, I always say, let's weed, because that's one of the first things you can do that make you feel like you're getting a handle on things, or clean out your email. That's what I always say too. Okay. Okay, now that we've spent the half an hour on light chit chat, here comes the tough stuff. I have been learning a whole bunch about human resources, HR, and COVID-19. So one of the very first things that I added to the list is, can I bring my child to work or can I homeschool my child at work? So those are two different age groups we're looking at. We'll assume that bring my child to work is going to be a preschooler, homeschool my child at work is going to be a school-aged child. Because of the way that school districts are rolling out plans, most of them have an option for schooling the child at home using school materials. So we'll call that homeschooling because school is taking place at home. It's not taking place anywhere else, it's taking place at home. I'm going to emphasize that a lot. In my previous life before libraries, I actually was a homeschool family and I schooled my kids all the way through school. They never went to school and I did a lot of consulting on that. And so this is an area that pretty familiar about, although my baby turns 30 this year, so there is that. So what this means is that some employees may have a skewed idea of how the Families First Corona Response Act works. That's the FFCRA. Under the FFCRA, there are regulations and guidelines issued by the Department of Labor, and here's the skinny. If it appears that if a child's school is physically open in any way, and the child is permitted to attend in person, because they do have a big birthday coming up, and the child is permitted by the school to attend in person, then any personal choice by the child's parents to have the child participate in remote schooling or homeschooling does not prove to be a qualifying reason for that FFCRA leave. The FFCRA does entitle eligible employees to take up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave and up to 10 additional weeks of expanded FMLA, Family, I think, Medical Leave Act, if the employee is unable to work, to include telework, because of a bona fide need to provide care for a child whose school or child care provider is closed down for reasons related to COVID-19. So the rules have really kind of tightened up, and it's because we know when, and I said this a couple of weeks ago when we had the unemployment claims that were fraudulent pop up, when times are bad, the bad guys really go to work. Not everybody is looking to spend all their time working if they find that there's a loophole that they can get out of that, but they would enjoy getting paid. Trying to be nice about saying this. So my child's school or daycare provider has moved to online instruction or to another model in which the child is expected or required to complete assignments at home. Is it closed? If the physical location is closed, then you qualify under this FFCRA. I'm not gonna send out a bunch of documents for you or anything like that. Those of you who are individual workers, if this is a situation that happens to you, I want you to call me. If you have part-time employees or other employees, someone is wanting to take advantage of this and you think, oh, that might not be such a great idea, so you have to move around regularly or the AC turns off, give me a call and I'll walk you through it. It is so overwhelming that I'm not going to flood our emails with information on this. There's something new that I just discovered today, and they didn't think on this one. So all of you should know by now that you cannot volunteer your time for the library. So Angie, that means if you're doing a story time about the sun, When you're watching TV after you've put the kids to bed, you can't be cutting out suns. If you are, you need to log that time and you need to be paid for it. I can't, well, I can because I'm different, but some of my employees like Missy and Liz and Kathy, I can't expect to send them home with work that they're going to do at home when they're not being paid on the clock for it. That is not me saying anything. That is Kansas law. That is federal labor law. Okay. Telework or working from home is changing the rules quite a lot. So do employers have to pay employees for unauthorized telework hours? This is very concerning to me. At CKLS, if someone is going to work extra hours, that has to be authorized because of the budget. I can't blow the budget because somebody wants to work 20 extra hours one month. So the Department of Labor said that employers must pay employees for all hours of telework actually performed, including overtime work, if the employer knew or had reason to believe the work was performed. This is true even of hours of telework that you did not authorize, the Department of Labor said. So that's a doozy right there. So we need to think very carefully before we authorize telework for people. Now, if the library is closed and we have to work from home, that's a little bit different. You can change that up. I told our people that we would be considered, all of us would be considered to be salaried. You're going to get paid if you work 6 hours. You're going to get paid if you work 5 hours. Under this new guideline, I couldn't do something like that. I would have to have very clear and specific rules for them. Maribeth, did you have your hand raised?
I have a comment about the Spark Fund when you're ready.
Yeah, okay. Let's do that because the next one is more of this same heavy stuff. Okay. Sparks.
So Spark Fund, they're task forces, if they haven't already been formed, are being formed now.
And that's at the county level.
That's at the county level.
You would invite your city to it.
And there's 2 forms to fill out, one on past COVID-related spending and one on expected expenses, like sanitizer. Thank you. Apparently that's not a word I can say.
Now here's what's interesting about Spark funds, and remember those don't come from the library, that comes to the county from the federal government. The counties are kind of given a lot of leeway in how they administer that and what that's going to look like and the paperwork to be filled out by county. I had no paperwork to fill out, but I had to submit receipts. So when we think the receipts forms to fill out, that may just be specific to your county.
So check with your county, I guess county clerk, they would probably be the ones to start that ball rolling, that conversation going. Looks like the deadline is August 7th for that. And then also don't forget about the CARES Act grant that the state library is administrating for us. It is due July 31st. And there's a form to fill out. It's 7-page application. You fill out the first 2 pages. There is also the direct deposit form. It'll ask for an ID number. Leave that blank. It'll ask for a supplier name. That's your library.
Right.
So the supplier ID number, leave that blank. And the state library will fill that out once you turn that in. And that
I have never filed a form that was so easy. The hardest part was getting my board chair to come in and sign it. On a good note, if you don't file that, the state library figured it out, and they figured out how much money would be available if every library in Kansas filed for the CARES Act. And what they determined is there would be about $6,000 left for each library system to use after that. So if your library doesn't fill it out, I'll be happy that money comes to my system and then we'll use it in a way that's nice. But I'm teasing because I really encourage you to fill that out. It's really, really easy. Cheryl at Plainville says their city manager has assisted with the Sparks. So yeah, it is easy. And both of these cover things like extra hand sanitizer, masks, the sneeze guard that you may have up. Yes, Ron, you can add ebooks through CARES money through CKLS. Great Bend Public Library is using it to buy more Hoopla books and checkouts for the Great Bend patrons. Yeah, Linda says it was so easy, it was almost confusing. Yes, please fill this thing out for the CARES grant, which is because your state library cares about you. That's the way I keep keeping them straight in my head.
There is a question about the CARES Act direct deposit form. If you've already received grant funds through direct deposit, do you have to fill out that portion of the app? I don't have that answer. That would be a question for Alice Smith at the State Library. On Friday, I shared her response to the question about the state supply ID, the supplier ID, and that's all the information I have. So I'm not sure on that one. Contact Alice Smith at the State Library. I can send out.
Right, and I think, and I attended a different meeting with the system directors, and I think that if your state aid is already on direct deposit, the state has that information, but absolutely double check with Alice. Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can spend that on, and digital content is one of them. I know that I have several libraries that want to do that. Any more talk about Spark and CARES? No? Okay. I have two more things to do with HR and the coronavirus. So the FFCRA, remember, it was Family First Corona Response Act, maybe, I'm guessing.
Yes.
How do you qualify for emergency paid leave? So under the FFCRA, many employers will have to provide up to 80 hours of paid sick leave benefits if an employee meets these qualifications. Brittany probably doesn't get paid sick leave, and Sherry might not either, and lots of you don't because you're in very small libraries. But if you qualify, your library still has to pay this, whether or not you normally get paid sick leave benefits. So if the employee has been ordered by the government, and we know in Kansas it would be by your health nurse and the sheriff delivers that order, to quarantine or to isolate because of COVID-19, they have been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine because of COVID-19. They have symptoms and are seeking a medical diagnosis, or they are caring for someone who is subject to a government quarantine or isolation order, or they need to care for a son or daughter whose school or child care service is closed due to COVID-19, or they are experiencing substantially similar conditions as specified by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So paid sick leave needs to be paid at the employee's regular rate of pay or minimum wage, whichever is greater, for leave taken for reasons 1 to 3 above. That would be, they've been ordered into quarantine, they've been advised to self-quarantine, or they have symptoms and are seeking a diagnosis. Employees taking leave for reasons 4 to 6 means they're caring for someone else, they may be compensated at 2/3 of their regular pay or minimum wage, which is ever greater. And you can use an additional 10 weeks of partially paid leave for childcare purposes. The reason that I'm talking to you about that kind of thing is because we're open now and we're out and about in society now, and we don't control what our employees do when they're away from the library. You may have someone who looks like me, normal, but secretly I may be a wild party animal and I may be going to, is it Lake of the Ozarks? See, I'm not a party animal, I have to ask. Is it Lake of the Ozarks? I may be going to the Lake of the Ozarks for parties and I come back to work and I'm sick, and school will be opening again soon. Yes, people are going to keep getting sick. And so this is a reason for me to be talking to you about this. I don't expect you to know it all. I just want you to say, oh, Gail mentioned that. I'm going to give her a call and see what she has to say about this. I'm not an HR lawyer, but I have resources that help with this. I think last year or the year before, our libraries indicated that they would like more help with HR kinds of things. And so I've made myself become a subject matter, I'm not a smarty pants yet on this stuff, so that I can help guide you through these situations. Now here's an interesting one that is not covered by this FFCRA. And that is if you have workers who remove their children from daycare solely out of fear of the pandemic, or employees who self-quarantine because they're afraid of catching COVID when they haven't been exposed, they are not covered by the FFCRA. So at what point do you start to question the employee who is self-quarantining for the 5th time now? Or they self-quarantine after every long weekend, but when you try to call them, you can't get in touch with them. These are things that are going to happen, and I want us to be thinking about that now, and that's why I'm talking about this. So yes, you can see me getting my party on at the local club and using slang too when I'm talking. Any questions about all of that?
I'm not seeing any in the chat, but let's give it a few more seconds.
To me, this is a lot like advocacy. It needs to be done, so I'm finding an efficient way to do it, but it is not fun for me. Maribeth and Patty, are there things that you think that I should be covering in regards to this or not? Or things that we may have talked about that I forgot to write down?
This is Patty. I think the biggest thing that really keeps coming up is when and how do I make that decision to scoot back a phase if I feel that that's necessary, and what are the potential repercussions if I do or don't do that. And then I guess the other thing that keeps coming up is if I'm following the rules, but my patrons are not, or my staff are not, and I'm talking rules of social distancing and mask wearing and those things, you know, what's that potential effect when I try to enforce those rules?
That's tricky. If you've been ordered by the county health nurse that only essential workers should be going to work, that's pretty darned easy because someone else is the one who's made that decision for you. If there's a big flare in your community and you as the director have a concern, or you as a library employee have a concern, take that concern first to your director, and then your director will take it to the board. And the board should be thinking about the staff's safety first, not the number of hours that we're open or the specific days that we're open. Those guidelines are in the public library standards, which there's a link to in the chat, but those are not laws and those are not rules that CKLS holds you hard and fast to. We haven't for a long time, and we're not going to start now. One of the conversations I've been having with my staff at Great Bend is we just flat don't have the door count. We have less right now after we're moving into our 4th week of the month than we usually have in a week. We're looking at, do we need to go back to our expanded hours for this fall? Or can we keep with our limited hours and maybe save a little bit of money on air conditioning? We can't have programming face-to-face because there's no way that we can figure out how to do this, and we've got a big building. There's just a whole bunch of questions really right now, And your boards need to be listening to you as the technical advisor. You're the ones with boots on the ground. You're the ones who know the emotional atmosphere, I would say, of the patrons when they come in. Most are very gracious and most are very happy. But every single one of us can close our eyes and imagine for a minute, and we know that patron that's going to give us a hard time if we have to wear masks in the library. We know what we're going to have to say to that person. Your board can require masks to be worn in the library, but immediately you need to have an alternate way of serving those people. Are you going to still offer curbside to those people who request it? There's a whole bunch of stuff we're navigating here that we really don't know about, that we haven't done, and we're feeling our way through it. What if our county health nurse has taken the position only essential services open, and you decide to shift back a phase, but the library down the road in the same county is not observing the order? Well, if the county health nurse recommended it and it didn't issue it as a health order, that's the difference. If they recommended it and your board is taking a more cautious approach and they want you to close. If there's a library down the road, and some of our libraries are as close as 15 miles apart, and their board is not taking the same cautious approach and recommend that they be open, that's their choice. Remember, libraries are locally funded and locally governed. You can't hold yourself, and standard isn't quite the right word, but you can't hold yourself to the standards of somebody down the road. It's their expectations, and it is their decision and conscience that they're doing the right thing for their community. They don't get to say what goes on in your community. That is what your library board does. And as the advisor, you've got to find a really sensitive way to explain that to your board, because they may think, well, that library on down the road is open, we need to be open. That's just not the case. Their library has many more workers than we do. Their building is twice the size. They have 0 cases in their community and we have 10. Too many things come into play, and one size fits all just isn't going to work right now. Sherry, I think you're right. We'll have more questions as these issues present themselves. This was to sort of just give you that acquaintance so you know who you're going to call if something pops up. And friends, things are going to happen. People are going to say, oh, I can't come to work, I was exposed. And maybe they were, or maybe they weren't. We've had 3 people in our building take COVID tests, and they've isolated, and the test came back negative. I'm very, very thankful for that. When we are waiting for their tests, I am on pins and needles, not because I'm worried about that position getting their work done. I'm worried about the workers. And I know that you all feel this way about the workers in your library, even if it's Pam in her kitchen by herself, or Brittany, who's in the library right now. We feel that way, and it's important. We feel strongly about our patrons, and I want you to know that, think about what's within your comfort zone here.
And when those questions do arise, you can shout it out at the CKLS Google group to the whole group. You can pick your favorite consultant and send them an email or give them a call, whichever media contact format is best for you. If we think it's a question that more people are going to ask about, we're going to share it with the group, but we can do that anonymously too.
Yes.
So please don't hesitate to ask those questions. If we don't know, we'll tell you we don't know, but we'll do our best to help you find the answer, or we'll do our best and we'll get you.
Absolutely. As a system director, I don't always know the answer. I have my group of people that I visit with, and they visit with me as well. But we find an answer, and then it goes to who it needs to go to. This is hard stuff, and we don't want you to feel like you're hanging out there, dangling from a thread trying to do it all yourself. We can't be there next to you, but we're certainly there in spirit. Like I said, we answered an email yesterday from Scandia because she was worried, or it was Saturday evening. She wanted to know. Anybody have any questions that is not related to COVID-19? How many people had unemployment benefits filed fraudulently? In CKLS, Librarians 8 that I know of, Kelly. The other systems have had none. They've not reported any. I know, though, that the relationship between the systems and the librarians and the other systems are not the same as the relationship that we have. We have a very different relationship with all of you. Yep, Pam, Kelly, Joanna, Ramey, Gail, there were a lot of us. Oh, Amy, this is lovely. Trust me, no question is too odd or small. I've asked some that I think are absolutely ridiculous, but need clarification or help, and they walk you through or find answers for you. CKLS is amazing. Thank you. And Bernie also had the fraud. Bernie is related to a cop, and so that was wonderful to have that perspective to chime in there. We are very much hoping, with all of the hope that our hopers can hold, that we will have in November or December, it is like everybody's double-crossed fingers, in the late fall or December, we will be able to hold a face-to-face summer library program workshop for 2021. We know that our building here does not give us the space we need, so we're looking at a couple of other places. I'm going to send Patty out on a field trip. Unfortunately, when I do that, she does have a credit card though, so I gotta give her some clear instructions to see if there's a space that's big enough. We have one in mind, but she's going to check on it, and then we have to find out if that's something that everybody would be comfortable coming to. But we really, really miss seeing your faces. And we would like to close out the year with a workshop in person if we can do it.
This is Patty. The goal is to get that workshop earlier in the year. So after the difficulty of trying to plan Summer Library 2020, that you'll feel like you're ahead of things. So the goal is November, and right now the date, and like I said, is we're all just wondering. The date that we have penciled in is November 12th. If we cannot do it in November, we are looking at February. We do know that the weather is always iffy in February and March, but the farther we get into March, the closer you are to Summer Library, and the more you feel like you've done your own thing and whatever. You will notice that we had been able to change a little bit, and we're able to add the print manual back for some of you, which was a blessing. And so that's one of the pieces that we did to make it feel a little more traditional. CSLP, the Collaborative Summer Library Program, who creates the manual, has realized with COVID-19 that they had gone so far towards digital that they were leaving some people behind. So this was a decision that we made as the state youth consultants to allow the print manual to be one of those items that you could order, and we know that that will help you. We also hope that after making an attempt at doing some things online, or the take and make world, that we will continue to serve those who might not be able to be there for a traditional Wednesday at 10 o'clock program. And so it's, I'm not asking you to do more, I'm just asking you to think about how we're serving and how we might serve in another place in our community, maybe not necessarily within our four walls. So don't forget everything that you learned for 2020, because it's going to be valuable as we move to 2021. I'm just hopeful for us and for all of you that you will get to have families into your libraries and able to do something that feels a little more, I hate to use the word, but a little more normal, because it's just felt like a year where it's not been. So
Yeah.
I'm very proud of the work that you've done. Lots of summer library program evaluations are already in, and I'm seeing testimonials that are telling me that your community has responded to the things that you've done. Great job, all of you.
Yeah, your Facebook pages are just loaded with wonderful, wonderful things. I'm just really so proud of all of you. One of the librarians asked if I can share the names of all the librarians that had fraudulent unemployment claims and the steps that we've taken. Essentially, there were 8 of us. I'm not really going to share the names. I'm not comfortable doing that. The steps that we took were to go onto the Kansas Department of Labor page to download the form for a fraudulent unemployment claim, to fill out the basic information. Unfortunately, the form is geared towards someone who knows that someone else is committing fraud, not that it's being committed towards me. I also then added a narrative that explained what was going on. I included a copy of the original paperwork that I received, and then I mailed it off to the Department of Labor. I haven't heard back yet. Someone else got through on a phone call. I had no luck with that. One city clerk was able to call in and say, hey, this was a fraudulent claim. Bernie said, let your local law enforcement know. That was wonderful. That is not really something I would have thought about right away. If you followed the steps that I outlined in the email, you've done all you can do. About 6 or 7 years ago, the Santy family's personally identifiable information was leaked by the Department of Defense. And so our stuff was out there. It was not deliberate, but it was leaked. And as a result, the Department of Defense needed to put into place some reassurance measures for those families that had this happen. And for us, what that is that they pay $1,000 a month for each of us for a really top-notch watchdog. And the watchdog, I get an email anytime anything happens, anytime anybody pings me for trying to steal my information, or anybody looking up financial information on me. The only things I've gotten pinged on all summer long have been movement of sexual offenders into my area and out. And so I'm comfortable knowing that my personal information was not used beyond this claim. So there it is. Pam says that's what she did too, and her accountant filed a form with the state. Yes, Kelly reported the fraud through an email for fraudulent claims. That's the most we can do right now. Melissa says, from Hoisington, considering the difficulties we faced, our program, Summer Library Program, was very successful. They've had over 28,000 minutes read so far. Wow, great. I know that the Great Bend readers are just really going gung-ho as well. Congratulations to everyone on a successful summer program. You've just done amazing things. We are just now over time, and so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Again, if you have any HR things dealing with COVID, please give me a call. If you don't want to talk to me, call somebody else, and we will get that straightened out. Angie wants to know quick, how do we know if there was any fraud involving our library? Angie, it wouldn't have been the library. It was for individuals received the letter. The library itself didn't. Now, the Central Kansas Library System received a letter saying that I was applying for unemployment. And that's the other, I received them, and that's another reason we knew it was fraud, because they knew that I wasn't doing that. Okay, I hope you all have a lovely week. I luckily have a quiet week so far. I've got to do some writing. I've got to write future planning for trustees for our trustee training next week.
On August 3rd at 6:30 p.m. It will be recorded and it will be archived.
Yep. I'd like to be able to say same bat time and same bat channel, but boy, that really makes me old. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.